Welcome to the AgriPod, brought to you by Herdwatch, the #1 farm management app used on over 21,000 farms. Join me, Katie Shanahan, as we bring together top experts in agriculture, influencers, and more each month. Uncover invaluable tips and tricks to navigate the agricultural calendar successfully. Engage in insightful discussions and current agricultural issues, all whilst having some fun along the way. Transform your farming journey by downloading the Herdwatch app today and say goodbye to farm paperwork.
I'm nervous. Come on, let's go.
Hello everyone and welcome back to episode 5 of the AgriPod by Herdwatch. My name is Katie Shanahan and today we're joined by Harry Frederick all the ways from South Central Kentucky. Harry hails from Winding Creek Farm and farms 700 ewes on 600 acres. They also train working dogs and have a very enjoyable presence on social media. So thank you very much, Harry, for joining me.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here.
Brilliant. So we were just saying there, it's the morning for you over in the States and it's the afternoon here for me in Ireland. So you're
Yes.
my first podcast guest from outside Ireland to the UK. So you're very, very welcome and thank you for doing this again.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be able to represent ourselves.
Brilliant. So look, we'll get straight into it. I hope this episode won't be too long. We don't want to take up your day because I know it's very busy for farmers at the moment. So first off, Harry, there's going to be a lot of people listening from Ireland and the UK, like I said, as well as America. But I just want you to give a little introduction, who you are, where you're come from, and just a little bit about your farming enterprise.
Well, so I got my start. I got out of the service in 2003. Got my start in agriculture on some larger cow-calf operations in the western part of the United States. So I got an opportunity to see large-scale animal agriculture, which, especially here east of the Mississippi, is something that a lot of people aren't familiar with. The farms are small, the flocks are small, so that really helped learn how to make decisions across a grander scale as far as numbers are concerned. Kind of maybe a bigger picture type attitude towards farming. And so, and then I've kind of operated different agricultural enterprises, managed a smaller beef, direct marketing beef operation for some folks in Western Pennsylvania, and kind of got introduced to the sheep from an older gentleman named George Weary, who he's 85 years old and he's still running 500 or 600 ewes on an accelerated lambing schedule. Primarily woolies. He won't ever convert to the hair sheep. It's an abomination, I think, in his mind. But yeah, so and started kind of learning from him some of the ropes of the sheep, and slowly realized that at least here in the United States, we found sheep per acre can generate more revenue than cattle can because they're quicker turnaround time and so on and so forth. So I started my first, we moved back to Michigan. I started my first commercial flock of Dorsets. And I really liked the Dorsets, but the problem was the shearing. Finding shearers here in the States is incredibly difficult. And then also, we really don't have the wool markets here. I think wool here in Kentucky was selling for 1 penny a pound. So it's kind of hard to justify hiring a shearer and running wool breeds. But and needless to say, when we started this farm, we were introduced to hair sheep, and the people I was talking to said, "You don't have to shear these." And I was like, "Now you've got my attention." And so, so we bought our first flock of Katahdin hair sheep. We partnered with my wife's parents on the farm. He's a retired contractor, so he helps. We build mostly all of our own structures here, barns and equipment sheds and stuff, which is very, very advantageous. When it comes to, he's always here on the farm, so you don't have to go looking for your contractor. He's always here, and and he usually works for free, which a lot of farmers understand that. We all, at one point or another, work for free. So, but yeah, so we started our
Yeah.
first flock of Katahdin ewes, or a hair sheep ewe that was developed here in the United States. And we've just kind of been growing ever since. Started the original farm was, I think, 225 acres, but it's got a lot of wooded ground on it. And then as we developed a reputation here in our area, which is fairly remote, and it takes a different type of person, I guess, to live remotely. People started realizing, oh, they're here for the long haul, and started kind of coming to us and saying, hey, would you be interested in my farm? Some of it started out as leases at first. We started leasing property and then turned into purchases. So, and now we run around, I guess, if our numbers fluctuate depending on how many ewes we cull, how many replacements we feel we need, how much ground we feel we need. But, we fluctuate between 500 and 700 ewes. Sometimes numbers come back down and then we raise it back up. We also have a feed lot. So we try and feed and finish lambs here as well, and buy lambs from around the state, and bring them in and finish them and sell them.
You're kept going, so very busy.
Yes.
And then just tell me a little bit about, because I know just from looking you up and following you on social media, it's very much a family enterprise as well. So tell me a little bit about, how it started off, even, from Martin and Chris, and coming on then to, yourself and Katie, because family farming is such a massive thing here in Ireland. So I just want to get, your view on it in the States. Is it important? Does everyone help out? How do you run it?
Yeah, so I think that it started originally, like I said, Martin had retired, virtually retired from his contracting business. He was building homes and doing remodels up in Michigan, and they were just kind of looking for a change. As he's getting on in age, the physical demands of that type of work. So instead, he decides to switch over and be a sheep farmer, where we do most of our stuff out in the field, and he's wrestling ewes every day. But
which is harder, I don't know.
I don't know if he got the better end of the deal, or he wishes he would have stayed doing that other. But Katie and I kind of pitched the idea. We were running a operation for some folks out of New Mexico, and they came and visited us, and we kind of said, hey, this is an idea we have, and it's a place where you guys could probably you could help us get it going, which they have. They've been incredibly generous with their time and their financial resources, but come and partner with us in this, and then eventually you guys will have a place to call home. They like to travel and go camping and stuff like that, but they kind of have a home base here. And then shortly after that, we bought a farm. So we bought the farm. We started running the sheep. And then shortly after that, my oldest daughter, who's 22, she's actually getting married on Saturday. But she was with her mother up in Michigan and going to school, and said I just need a change. And we had just bought a farm with another home on it. And it's always been my goal. My mother will tell people, and I don't know if this is just a mom being a mom or whatever, but that ever since I was 5 years old, I always used to tell everyone that someday I would have a farm and my entire family would live there. And I started telling people that at 5 years old. And so when she said, Dad, I think I want to come to Kentucky and try that out. I said, well, we've got a place for you. And so she moved down here and, by herself, didn't know anybody. And fortunately for us, she met a young man who's from down in here. Like we live in a little area called Center Point, Kentucky, which is, I guess the best term for it is off the beaten path. It's fairly remote. But he's from actually down in here in Center Point, Kentucky. And so, and he has a little boy, that he came with, who's now 3. So we consider him our grandson. So we have virtually 4 generations on the farm. And as far as the workload, like Katie and I handle the primary day-to-day stuff, the long-term planning. But for a long time, Martin was my help on the farm, and we went out every day and did whatever needed to be done, fencing or doctoring ewes or lambing or whatever. We lamb out on pasture, and then Katie's now on the farm, and so he's kind of gone to more of the old man role, where we say, hey, can you run into town and pick us up this? Can you do this? And we need this done, and which I think he's at the point in his life where he's ready for that role. I think the day-to-day slog of farming it kind of weighs on you, especially for an older guy. And I'm not calling him old by any means, but he's older than I am. So, but yeah. And then as far as my daughter actually works for our feed company. She works in their accounting department. And so she contributes by getting us a pretty good employee discount on all of our product needs. And then, when we go out of town, she'll look after the sheep. And then my soon to be son-in-law is a heavy equipment operator, and we have a dozer on the farm, to move stuff around. And so anytime we need serious dirt work done or whatever, there's nobody on the farm better with a big piece of equipment than him. So we're like, hey, when you have a minute, as if you're not busy enough working full time, would you come move some dirt for us? So, but yeah, so, and then my mother-in-law, she's kind of the unheralded hero of the whole group, because she keeps everyone fed. She keeps everyone going, motivated. And I will tell you, when she needs to step in for the sheep and pull lambs or help us gather or work sheep or move sheep, she's always there to do it. She's a very good sport and very helpful individual on the farm. So.
Well, that much for sure sounds like your typical Irish farming family. Anyway, everyone gets involved, no matter if you're working full time or not. You have your role on the farm, so it's good to see it's the same over there.
Yes.
I just want to talk a little bit about the sheep. So, like here in Ireland, people are lambing at the moment. Myself, I'm a sheep farmer as well. We have pedigree sheep, so we actually lamb earlier in the year. But what about yourselves? When is lambing happening for ye, or what's the usual breeding calendar of the year?
So it fluctuates. We're on an accelerated lambing schedule, or we try to be on an accelerated lambing schedule. So we'll try to get the ewes. This year we lambed early through January and February, and I'm sure the weather. You guys are familiar with wet, cold, rainy, horrible weather.
Especially the last few weeks in Ireland has been, well, the last 7 months really.
Yeah. So that's kind of how our winters are. We don't get a lot of snow. We don't get like the brutal cold. But we decided, because we try to sell to ethnic markets, so we try to meet. And what we've learned is ethnic holidays are kind of a moving target. And so it's better to just set your lambing dates for when your lambing dates are convenient for you, and work it that way. So we're kind of making some adjustments there. But we lambed this year in January and February, and out of the blue came a winter storm that dumped probably, 6-7 inches of snow on us. And then the temperatures were down like close to zero, like hovering. And I think some mornings it was below zero. And the girls, of course, when the barometer dropped, they started lambing like crazy. So, it was a difficult lambing season. So we're probably going to, in the future, avoid that. So March is a good time for us to lamb, like after March 15th into April. We usually allow ourselves a 45-day lambing window because of the accelerated nature of our lambing schedule. We need to get ewes fit and then bred back for a possible fall attempt. And so March is ideally when we would like to lamb. Some people like to even push it to April, just so the weather is more cooperative. But I would say March, and then like if we can lamb in the fall in September, October, even into November, we have pretty good luck, pretty good weather. Um, June, July, August here in the state of Kentucky uh, is really, really hot, like 90% humidity, 92 to
Oh
95
wow.
degrees. So it can, you got a lot of, that's when the parasites are really running and that type of stuff. So it can be difficult to do anything
Yeah.
besides keep stuff alive in those months. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's tough. And then when it does come to the breeding, how do you do it? Do you have rams that you run with the ewes, or what do you do for that?
Yeah. So um, we run our rams, like I said, 45-day window. We figure 34 days to catch 2 heat cycles. And then we give them like an extra, week or better to, because sometimes when you first, and we'll try to run the rams like on a fence line with the ewes to try and get the ewes synced up, like kind of like I guess the ram effect, they call it. Instead of doing
Yeah.
cedars, I know some guys use cedars and manipulate hormones artificially, but we try to do it with the rams, and then we'll turn the rams in for 45 days, and we try to be as cognizant of that window as possible, and really hold ourselves and discipline ourselves to keeping those windows, because the ewes have to lamb out, they have to wean the lambs, and they have to be back in decent body condition to be bred
Hmm.
back. And it's a very I guess we're asking a lot of our ewes. Where typically you'll see in some operations, guys say, "I've got a 10-year-old ewe that's still giving me, twins every year, trips every year, or whatever." Um, if a ewe is 6 years old in our program, she's been exceptional. Um,
Yeah.
just because it's just such a hard, and as a shepherd, and I'm sure your audience will understand this. You have to understand. Well, yes, you're trying to make moves for profitability. You have to understand at what cost that is coming at to your animals. So we feed probably more than your average. Our input costs with that are a lot greater because we have to keep those girls fit and have to keep them fed, because you got to be fair to your animals. So yeah.
Yeah. And when you're picking rams, then like what are kind of the characteristics you're looking for in order to what type of lamb do you want at the end of it?
I think for us, that's constantly evolving. So we started with just whatever Katahdin rams we could find, and here in the U.S. the sheep are kind of, no pun intended, the black sheep of the agricultural community. Sheep farming in this country, with the exception of a handful of families, but sheep farming in this country is a relatively new concept. Um, and so our genetics and the way things are done are light years behind, like say you guys in Ireland, where it's generational, and in the UK where it's generational. It's I would say the sheep industry, my understanding in the UK and in Europe is probably at the forefront of
Yeah.
animal agriculture, whereas here we're last place. 70% of our lamb that's being consumed currently in this country is imported. And so having the ability to get a hold of like really solid genetics is always a challenge. And with the Katahdins in particular, the hair sheep, they're great for some things. They're exceptional mothers. They have great feet. They're excellent browsers, so you can turn them into like wooded areas, and they'll climb trees. They'll climb up in trees and eat leaves, and they use that type of terrain exceptionally well, and they also use pasture well, so they're kind of good there. But they're muscling and kind of those genetics that you're looking for as far as a meat animal are really subpar. And so what we've done, so you're trying to find that Katahdin ram that's going to pass on like these incredible genetics, and some guys have found it. But to purchase from our standpoint, to purchase those genetics is costly. So what we've gone to doing is crossing our Katahdin ewes with a wool, like a terminal type sire, like a wool breed. Right now we're using some Ile-de-France rams, which is kind of like an older school type Dorset, like what the old Dorsets used to kind of look like. Not as much leg, little bulkier framed guys, better muscling qualities. And then we're also going to work on that fella I told you, George Weary, a friend of ours. He raises some Texel crosses, and I think we're going to try and run some Texels over our girls and see just what type of product that produces. We need something that's our market's light lamb. So ideally and we wean at 60 days. So ideally at 60 days, if I could wean lambs and put them in the lot for a week or two and then be able to move them down the road, that would be advantageous. And so I just need something that will push the genetics to allow us to do that.
Yeah. So, and I suppose I'm just thinking about the numbers you have, see here, what sheep I would have now would be kind of Charlie sheep, or we'd have, they're called Suffolk. Suffolks would be, big heads, big legs, really hard to lamb. What are those breeds like in terms of, how easy are they to lamb?
Our girls, I tell people all the time, I got a buddy in Pennsylvania that's running Katahdins, and he's got really big Katahdins, like big framed, heavy girls. But he kind of lambs through a barn system. And it's just a smaller acreage, smaller set of ewes. And we were up there delivering a dog, and we were kind of watching him, and we were talking about, we're just comparing the benefits of how both of us do things. And I told him, as far as our first time lambers, they lamb out on pasture, and we probably pull less than 10% of our lambs.
Wow.
And so
very little.
They're extremely efficient. And then we'll come out in the morning, and there's a first time ewe who's had a lamb or maybe even a set of twins, and she's got them up and going. And we're like, good girl, we'll come back later for you. Because what we do is we have this thing, it's called a lambulance. It's a cart we pull behind our side-by-side, our buggy. And we'll catch the ewes and the lambs, and we'll move them to like a maternity pasture. But very rarely, I think our lambing barn has maybe like 15 jugs in it. And we don't have any other space indoors for ewes. So if they can't do it out on pasture in our scheme, they can't stick around, because we're not going to build a big. I mean, I don't know. I might love a big hoop building to lamb out of. I've never done that, so I don't know. Maybe I would fall in love with something like that. But right now we do things. We do things as traditional, I guess, as I've heard people here in the States go, well, you guys don't lamb traditionally, like through a barn like everybody else. I'm like, well, I don't know if that's traditionally, because the guys overseas have been doing it out in pastures for thousands of years and making it work. So I think that's the traditional way of lambing. So we rely heavily on our dogs for that type of stuff. But, as far as lambing ease, we have very little trouble. The Katahdin ewes are extremely efficient mothers, extremely good milkers. So we're fortunate there. Yeah.
Good. You mentioned dogs there, which kind of links us in nicely. I don't want to call them sheep dogs, because I see on your social media they're also Is it goose dogs?
Yeah. So here in the States, it's so I've been using dogs on farming operations, various types of dogs. We started with, I guess you call them Australian cattle dogs. We call them healers. Um,
Hmm.
and that's what I started with on the cow calf operations. And then I got my first collie, and I was like, oh, this is a this animal is a different thing altogether, you know. And so, but one of the things over here in the States that I've been shocked with is we have so many these great populations of Canada geese that they're migratory. Some of them have become non-migratory, so they stick into an area and don't leave. And the government has deemed that these animals cannot be eliminated in certain states, and they have to be protected. But then you have business owners or municipalities that are dealing with these massive flocks of birds that are aggressive to people, and they make a mess of everything. They pull grass out because they'll graze, and
Hmm.
and then they'll nest, and they become like violently protective of their nest. So, and they'll like nest in wild places, like right in front of a corporation's front door. So everybody's getting assaulted by these birds. And so what some of these guys have done, is they've learned that they can use the collie because of their predatory drive, which is what makes them effective on sheep. Use the collie to eradicate these geese populations. And so they it's fully trained dogs. They know their they have the same flank commands, and they a lot of them are required to swim. And it's amazing that they'll teach these dogs to flank in the water. So like when you're saying come by way to me, they'll do that in the water, and the dog will start swimming like in the flank, towards
Wow.
and and so they found it as a more humane way to
Hmm.
to get rid of the geese, and just I guess the geese start to think this area now has a predator in it. There's a constant predator presence, so we cannot
Yeah.
be here
Move
anymore.
on.
Yeah. So like especially in the eastern part of the state, or the eastern part of the country, excuse me, um, these goose dog businesses are popping up everywhere. And so people want collies, and like we don't run a goose. And I always tell people who buy goose dogs, we don't run a goose dog business just because I don't have the time to do that. But also, we don't have that many, areas with geese down here.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of really good companies out there who've been running goose dogs for over 20 years, that are doing, they're doing really well, in these companies and universities. I mean, we've got dogs on like Wichita State University. A friend of ours run dog, and he's got a contract with the state university there. And um, we just sold a dog up in Long Island, New York, to a school district because they have a lot of geese issues, being right there on the water. Um, and it's just another avenue for guys like me who are training dogs, and incidentally, the money that someone will pay for a trained goose dog, is, I mean, it's incredible. Some might say obscene,
Cool.
the amount of money that someone will pay for a goose dog. So for those that are training like dogs, and can get them on birds, and kind of get them going in that direction, it can be just another really beneficial revenue stream for the farm. Um, so
Cool.
yeah, the goose dog thing it's a pretty wild thing. So
And are you breeding collies yourself, or how many do you have?
yeah, so we try to raise some litters of pups. We have We're always bringing in new bloodlines. Incidentally, most of them are imported bloodlines um, from the UK and stuff. And I always say, these are kind of the guys who invented this thing. They know what they're doing, and over there where
Yeah.
you guys are at, breeding collies uh, for proper work is generational, like 5, 6, 7
Mm-hmm.
generations deep. They're running um, dogs like Ricky Hutchinson and Kevin Evans, and some of these guys are there. I mean, these guys they have family lines that they've been running. My uncle, my grandpa, whatever, ran this type of dog.
Yeah.
And so we really find that's the type of stuff that works best for us. So we'll try and get dogs that are bred in that direction. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then here on the farm, before we breed anything, I think we're a little bit different than some breeders. Some breeders will breed off of papers. Um, and I guess that's one way of doing it, but papers don't always, and people that have collies understand, papers don't always guarantee
Yeah.
success. And that's same with anything, with you guys raising pedigreed sheep and stuff like that. Papers aren't always the end all be all, and sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
a prove it to me type situation. So we'll bring a dog in, a young dog, and we'll get them, start putting them through the paces on the farm. And if there's something that I say, or my wife will say, that dog needs to stay here, it's super useful. We like this or that about the dog, then that's kind of breeding criteria for us, combined with the pedigree and that type of thing. So
Yeah.
the pedigree only takes us so far. They have to prove to us that they're going to be useful to us on the farm. And certain criteria like that our dogs have to meet is, they can't have any neurological, you know, how some of these dogs kind of get weird, I guess, for lack of a better
Yeah.
word.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so they have to be mentally stable. They have to look good physically, but also like certain criteria for sheep work, like they have to be able to single and work singles. And everybody's like, well, shouldn't every collie? We've had collies come through here that if you pull a single, they'll just like, it's almost like they don't see it. They're like, I don't see what you're
Yeah.
wanting me to work. And so it's important, that type of criteria, because we do a lot of lambing work, and so that means isolating a ewe and her lambs, and so we can catch them and put them in a trailer and move them somewhere else. So just a lot of criteria, and we don't always. Sometimes we don't always hit the nail right on the head, but sometimes we do, and but it also makes it challenging for here in the States. You have a lot more people that are they possess border collies for sport. Whether that be
Okay.
sheepdog trials, cattle dog trials, which I guess mimic real working situations to an extent by their design. But when we breed puppies, they're going to be working focused animals, and some people don't
Yeah.
understand what that means, what that entails. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so we really when we sell puppies to people, we try to tell them, look, this is going to be, if you allow this puppy to be out and about, he's going to create trouble for you. You have
Yeah.
to, there's a certain discipline and a certain structure you have to have while raising these puppies, because they're bred for work, because that's what we need them for. And sometimes
Mm-hmm.
people they're like, oh, it's so cute. Well, tell me it's cute in a year when it's running your stock all over your place.
Yeah.
So, but yeah.
How old are the pups then, or the young dog, when they're trained and it's time to move them on to a new home? How old are they usually?
So sometimes Katie will list the puppies and we'll sell them, weaned off their mother young. Um, and then I guess it's advantageous for us that we train our own because, like if they don't sell, we just keep them when we raise them. And then we start them in training. We usually start them in training around a year, depending on the dog, I guess. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's not, it's not necessarily their, their physical working ability or their talent. Like, Alistair McRae, who's a Scotsman and probably one of the best dog handlers in our country. He's won just about everything. He says you don't mistake talent for maturity. And so you'll have these young dogs that are really talented, they're really keen to work, and man, they look fancy and they, very stylish looking dogs. And then you start putting the pressure of training on them, and they fall apart or they get trained too
Yeah.
early. And then, at 5, 6 years old, when they're really starting to come around and make a dog, they start getting burnt out. And so we're really cognizant of that. If I see, like, and we'll start exposing puppies to stock young with certain controls in place. But it's very limited. Like if I get a puppy turned on, they're turned on. You don't have to worry.
Yeah.
From then on, that animal's turned on. And so you'll see these people, they keep taking a young dog back to stock, back to stock, back to stock. And I think they risk either getting their puppies hurt, getting their stock hurt, getting themselves hurt. I know people have had sheep run right through. I mean, I've had sheep run through my legs and stuff like that with young dogs. So,
Yeah.
and then when you see the dog starting to, like a pup starting to shy from pressure, and get sulky or their feelings hurt, then I think maybe it's time to put them up and let them grow up a little bit. And we take what we call pack walks. So we'll take all the females in the kennel and we'll walk them, every day. We get them out, get them exercise, let them run together, socialize. And then we do the same thing with the male side of the kennel. So they're always getting out and getting something done. They may not be getting worked every day because that may not be what they need. But they're getting that exercise. We have a lot of wooded trails here on the farm that we can take them, and they get a lot of good exercise, and the socialization is important. Being around other dogs. So.
Yeah, I can imagine. You're on about dogs there, and here in Ireland, we'd have during lambing time, especially, we'd have a massive problem when it comes to foxes. Especially in recent months, videos popping up everywhere of foxes taking young lambs constantly. The foxes are probably fatter than any domesticated dog in Ireland and the UK, really. I see ye have these big guard dogs. Talk to me a little bit about those. What are they, first of all? What are the breed of dogs they are? How many have ye? And just what types of predators are you keeping away from your sheep?
So the guard dogs, we started with Great Pyrenees dogs. They're massive. They've got a very thick hair coat, which in the summer in Kentucky is not ideal. And then they're very loud dogs. They bark a lot. They warn predators, hey, stay away. And so we weren't a fan of those dogs, as they were. So we started breeding them to an Anatolian cross, which is a shorter haired dog, more leggy, not as loud, not as vocal of a dog, maybe a little bit more athletic, I guess, type build, but still big, but not massive. Like some of our Pyrenees is almost like they were too heavy to travel, with the sheep.
Okay.
And our sheep, we're running bigger fields, and you'd find the dog's just like laying over by a tree, just exhausted, and he's just too heavy. So we found these Anatolians, and they've done a really good job for us. And then we found a new breed. They're called, the guy we buy hay from, a Mennonite fellow, and his family was raising these, they're called Caracachan and I believe Turkey or Asian shepherds or whatever. But and I think also our guard dogs are a massive challenge. And so when people see, and I guess we've had as many as 17 or 18 dogs, I believe, at a time. And
Okay.
it's a challenge because you have to give the dogs the autonomy to look after your investment, which when you're running 700 ewes with lambs at their side, the financial ramifications of that investment running around out in the pasture are substantial. And then you're
Yeah.
putting that responsibility of protecting that investment in the hands of a dog. Um,
Yeah.
and sometimes they're just not ready for that responsibility, I guess. And then, we're very fortunate in the area we live in. Our neighbors have been very gracious to us because these dogs, they have a wide scope of what they think their patrolling area is. And so, our saving grace is they're not aggressive towards livestock. So if they show up on the neighbor's cattle farm, he'll just call us and say, "Hey, I saw one of your white dogs out here," and he's not hurt nothing, but I
Oh
just
yeah.
want to let you know where he was if you're looking for him. And so we're very
Okay.
fortunate in that way. But I think if we were closer to a more metropolitan area or neighborhood, um, it would be difficult for us because I don't think our neighbors would be as kind and understanding and gracious
Mm-hmm.
to us. Um, and so, but the dogs, once you get them going right, we find, and we've also evolved as owners of guard dogs, like what do we allow, what don't we allow, um,
Yeah.
how do you train a dog that you only see 2-3 times a day?
Okay.
It's very difficult. And so so I tell people all the time, the guys will call me and they're looking to get into sheep and they'll say, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting a couple guard dogs." And I'll say to them, "Well, do you have a barn or someplace you can lock your sheep up at night? Because I would go that direction in lieu of a guard dog. I'm not for certain operations, guard dogs are, but they're also they're one of our toughest challenges uh,
Okay.
on our farm. But as far as predators that they will protect against, we have some mountain lion in our area, and we've had
Bit,
a
bit bigger than a fox.
yeah, yeah, and we have black bear. The black bear have a tendency to kind of stay to themselves, but the mountain lion, and I don't know that we've ever had a sheep taken by a mountain lion. I guess we'd never know because they're pretty secretive about how they hunt. But we did have a dog, one of our smaller females, tangle with a mountain lion, and of course
Wow.
she lost. But
Yeah.
we didn't lose any sheep,
Okay.
and that's the other thing with the guard dog situation is you have to understand what their purpose is. It's not to be a pet. While most of our guard dogs you can walk up and pet and love on, and you'll see that in some of our Instagram videos. We have them; they'll come up to the buggy. We
Yeah.
feed them every day. And like our grandson Hudson, he can go out. Like if a child were to get lost and like wander out into our pasture, that you would find them like being protected by the dogs. That's kind of how these dogs operate. But at the same time, you have to understand that they're there as a shield for your sheep and your
Mm.
investment. And so you're going to lose some. You're going to have to
Yeah.
eliminate problem dogs because you can't pass that problem dog onto another farmer. It's irresponsible.
No.
And
Yeah.
so the best way we found to raise these dogs is as puppies. They're the female will whelp in the sheep. She will raise her puppies in the sheep, and
Wow.
the dogs start to think they're part of the flock. And so even when our sheep have escaped and have gotten out on the neighbor's soybean field or whatever, the dogs go with them. And so,
Okay.
and then as you get your processes kind of worked out of how you train them and how, how you teach them what the responsibilities are, then you really start to trust them, and you start to read behaviors. Like if the sheep are all balled up and the dogs are out in front of them, well, they were getting harassed last night, because the dogs will herd them together, and one of the dogs will stay with the flock and the others will go out and confront the threat. It's really amazing to experience firsthand, because I mean, at one point you're looking at them like this big, goofy, 125, 130
I
pound,
know.
but at the
They're
same
big teddy
time,
bears.
yeah, at the same time, I mean, they're extremely protective. And that's the other thing too. I know over there, where you guys are from, people are allowed to travel private land. I guess they call it responsible use of land, or
Yeah, Scotland is big for that. Yeah, Scotland
yeah.
in the UK would be a big place for that.
And so, like in that situation, like of course, here in the United States, like it's one of those. It's my land. Nobody can, nobody's allowed on it. You're trespassing.
That's kind of our Irish attitude.
Yes, yes. And so, like I think in a situation like that, like in Scotland, where people are allowed to have access to people's private ground, it would be a problem, because while the people might not be in jeopardy, their animals will. We've had neighbor dogs get killed by our guard dogs in the field, and you'll come out in the morning
Yeah.
and the neighbor's dog is laying there, and it makes it makes a difficult situation. But when you have neighbors who are agriculturally based, and they say, well, he shouldn't have been in your sheep.
Yeah.
And that's the attitude we have. Of course, we don't want that to happen. But and the other benefit of the guard dogs too, sometimes, is they'll set a scent perimeter around our area, and of course other animals, especially coyotes. We have a lot of coyotes. We do have foxes, but not in the numbers you guys have them. We have coyotes, which is another struggle, because if you kill them, they reproduce faster. And a lot of people don't understand, when you start killing a bunch of coyotes, when they sound off at night and they realize they're missing some of their compadres, the females will come in heat almost instantaneously.
Wow.
And they'll replenish their numbers. And so, but our guard dogs will kill the occasional coyote. I think foxes are too. I don't know how effective a guard dog would be against a fox, because I think a fox is a fairly crafty critter, and I think well, the guard dogs are smart. They're smart to an extent. There's a limitation to their intelligence, and so I don't know. But I do know that scent marking is very advantageous to us, because those other animals say this is the scent of a large predatory animal, and we need to stay out of this area. So and the other thing too.
Sheep are aware? Do you think the sheep are aware of this dog is here to protect us? They're obviously well used to these dogs.
The relationship between our guard dogs and our sheep, our guard dogs. So it's incredible, and for those like in the States that run guard dogs, when we introduce new sheep to a flock, or say we move guard dogs to a different group of sheep, the dogs will walk around and get a scent profile on every animal under their charge. And they'll come and they'll clean the ewes, they lick the ewes in the face. If the ewes are in trouble, they will run to the dogs. The dogs will help clean, like we've seen abandoned lambs out in the pasture that the guard dogs were just packing along like they were its mother.
Oh.
And so, and like the female guard dogs with more of that maternal instinct, we've seen them curl up with lambs and keep lambs warm in the cold. I mean, they are incredible in that way. So the relationship between the sheep and the dogs, because when we bring our collies out, uh, instantaneously the sheep are on alert and they're getting ready to go,
Yeah.
pack it up, let's go. Here comes those other dogs. Um, and that's the other
Yeah.
cool relationship.
They know the difference.
Yeah, they know the difference. And when we move our sheep with our collies, the guard dogs just go along with the sheep as part of the flock. We don't have to remove our guard dogs or do any of that.
Yeah.
Um, it's a kind of a neat synergy of the whole
Yeah.
operation. So
No, that's definitely cool.
yeah.
I just want to talk a little bit about, some challenges. So, say, for instance, here in Ireland at the moment, we're struggling big time with the weather. It's absolutely a beautiful day now today, but for the last, few months, it has been rain, rain, rain. Like I'd say you could count on two hands the amount of dry days we've had. So it's been a massive struggle. Cattle have been, we house them during the winter time. They've been in for way longer than we ever anticipated. We're running out of fodder to keep them going. What are some of the challenges in terms of farming, whether it be sheep or cattle or cow calf over in the States, kind of as a whole, for farmers or ranchers over there?
I think it varies. The United States as a country is so massive and has such
Mm-hmm.
different the stuff that's going on in the West, like a rancher or a farmer, like say when we lived and operated in Wyoming, the one place we were on was 180,000 acres.
Oh my
um,
God.
and so when you're operating, and everybody's like, that's beautiful, that's incredible, but that type of ground will only support, like, as far as a stock rating, you may be able to run like one cow per 20 acres.
Okay.
And so what the challenge is for, back in the day when that land was super cheap, that was easy to do. But now when you've got land in Wyoming that's going for 10, 15, 20,000 an acre, and so it's taking, like, say in a good year, it takes 5 acres to support a cow. Well, you've got $100,000 invested in that acreage. That poor cow never has a chance
Yeah.
to pay that back. So, and then in the western part of the country, you have massive predator issues. You have wolves, you have bear, that are protected, federally protected.
Yeah.
And then you have the elements. When we were in Wyoming in the mountains, feet of snow, just absolute feet of snow that didn't leave until the springtime. They don't get any rainfall, so you have to, it's the opposite problem. Like there, they get hardly any rainfall. We have to flood irrigate out of the river to get any hay raised, and then the growing season's 45 days. So that's the western part of the country. The eastern part of the country, I would say the availability of large pieces of ground is a struggle. My buddy up in Pennsylvania, he's looking to expand his farm. I think they're leasing like 60 something acres right now. And he says the ability to find a farm that's just 100 acres is almost impossible. And
Mm-hmm.
if you do, he goes, farms that are 50 acres are going for 750 to $2 million, 750,000 to $2 million. And he goes, can you justify raising livestock on that? And then the other thing I think for the sheep industry is just the relative infancy that the sheep industry is in here in the States. For the longest time, I guess, like after World War II, when guys were like forced to eat like canned mutton, they came home and like nobody wanted to raise sheep. That was like, and you still, here in Kentucky, there's so many myths of sheep destroy ground and sheep do this and sheep overgraze and sheep, just all these horror stories. And like a lot of the people are starting to figure out that sheep are a very beneficial species that can coexist with, say, a cattle operation or poultry or whatever. But I think the infancy that our country is experiencing with sheep, and here in Kentucky, we've had an over 7% increase from last year to this year in sheep.
Mm-hmm.
And in comparison to 5 years ago, it's a 54% increase in the number of sheep in the state in Kentucky. And so, because Kentucky is topographically very similar to, Ireland, Scotland, hills,
Yeah.
and that type of stuff. So you have to pay attention to erosion control and that type of stuff. But and then just like you guys, government regulation. Seems like every time you turn around, the government's telling a farmer how to raise your products, and
Yeah.
and then I also think the commercialization of farming is a struggle. There used to be, and I mean, I'm sure it's the same over there. It used to be a community of people who supported that community. So if you wanted lamb, you'd go to your guy who raised lamb and you'd buy it from him directly off the farm. Or you needed milk, you'd go to the dairy and you'd buy it straight away from the dairy. And you got so many people who are being disconnected, I think, with farming and agriculture across the world. You ask a kid now here in the States, where does your milk come from? Well, it comes from Walmart.
Yeah.
That's not where it comes from. Walmart has to get it somewhere. And so I think that's a huge challenge. And I think the same thing happens here that's happening over there. The vilifying of people who operate in agriculture, think we're mistreating our animals, think that we're just in it for the money. And I tell people all the time, man, if I was in this for the money, I'm the biggest idiot on the face of the planet, because our margins are very, very slim at all times. But I think that's a problem. But that relates to the disconnect. We have people who have never been on a farm, that we open our farm up to a lot of people, and we do it on purpose, because how are you going to educate someone about something they've never experienced?
Exactly.
And some of the old adages, well, I don't want any of those city people on my farm. And I understand that. I understand, you open your doors to a different demographic of people, and you have to take everything that, like on our Instagram and stuff like that. Some of the stuff that Katie videos, the comments are like, we're putting a ewe in our ambulance and her lambs are up front. And people are saying, well, why are they separating the babies from the mother? And it's literally just for the journey to the next pasture. But they think we're being like cruel to the ewe because we've taken her babies, and they're literally up front. She can put her nose on them. But what they don't understand is that if we put them in the same compartment as her, she might, during that trip, trample them and hurt them, because she's an animal and she doesn't, and so it's just, there's a disconnect there. Fewer and fewer farmers trying to provide more and more food for a growing population. It's just, it's difficult.
Aside from the odd few negative comments, I suppose even myself, having social media, promoting Irish farming, doing podcasts like this, I'm trying as much as possible reach to, obviously, farmers. We all know what we do and we all support each other. But what I try to do a lot is get to the people who don't understand what we do and try and educate them. Do you find having the social media, the website, doing different things, does that help? Do you think, in trying to promote what you do?
I think it does. I'm fairly old-fashioned and don't understand technology very well. I'm thankful that my wife does, and she, like anything you see, I guess I'm frequently the subject of some of the social media stuff, but she's kind of the driving force behind that. And at first I was like, I don't know that I was incredibly receptive to the idea of it, because you are putting yourself out there and you are exposing some of your processes, which you have to understand that people aren't necessarily going to either understand or agree with what you're doing. And so you have to be willing to, and she does a great job when we do get, people who make, negative comments. She does a really good job of fielding those and explaining things. And I do think it's a necessity. I think like you have guys on, and some guys on social media are a little bit more incendiary with the way they're doing things. And I understand that too. I understand the anger that comes behind the attacks and this and that. But I think like if you were to pull back, if as agricultural people, we were to pull back and just kind of go inside our little shell and just hide everything we're doing, I don't think that's the answer either, because the education needs to happen. Now, whether the people will be receptive to that education, receptive to seeing what they're seeing, that's not for me to decide. But I think as farmers, as people who deal in agriculture, who promote agriculture, who are feeding these people, we need to give them a glimpse into what we do every day so that they understand, look, when we lose we have a rough night and we lose a whack of lambs, it's devastating. And it, there's a lot of, just as well as I do, and a lot of the farmers will understand how many sleepless nights we have because the girls are out there and now a thunderstorm has rolled in that you didn't expect, and they're lambing in it. And you're not sleeping, and those type of things. And people need to experience that. And so while I think it's a challenge, I think it's a necessity. And really, we live in a day and age where social media is so accessible and it's so usable. Like the stuff Katie can get done and the videos she puts up, I'm just like astounded by it because it's really well done and it gets a good message across. And so I think it needs to be used to our advantage. And I encourage any farmers, even some of you old guys out there who are really, being, hard about, I'm not going to let anybody on my plate. They got to see, as our job as farmers has become less about raising a product, but more about being an ambassador for what we do for a living and for our livelihood. So I think it's very important. And and there's still times where she's like, let me film this. And I'm like, I am in a hurry. I don't have time for this to be filmed. But I think it's very important. So.
Yeah, no, I agree. Not always easy, but definitely good to get the message across.
Yes.
Look, we have been talking for an hour. It has probably been the fastest hour I've ever had, which is great. We had a great conversation. There's so much there. I love how certain things very similar to us here, certain things like the wildlife and the predators completely different, and make me appreciate the foxes now maybe, seeing as we don't have any mountain lions or bears or coyotes.
Right.
So we're going to leave it there for today. Harry, I just want to say thank you to yourself and to Winding Creek Farms for coming on today.
Thank you very much.
Good. And guys, if you do want to follow along their journey, they have social media, Instagram, TikTok, website. Just search Winding Creek Farms and you'll find them. So I'm going to leave it at that today. Make sure to tune in next month. We'll have another guest in store. But until then, guys, take care.
This podcast was brought to you by Herdwatch. Download the Herdwatch app today to eliminate farm paperwork and make better decisions with your farm in your hand. I hope you enjoyed this month's AgriPod by Herdwatch. Tune in next month where we will have another special guest in store. Bye!